With an oversaturation in the survival genre over the past few years, the titles released seem to all meld into the same game loop. However, V-Rising is not that much removed from the list, but it is different enough in all major aspects and where it matters to warrant a closer look. So join me today to find out what makes this game stand out in a sea of survival games, and ask and answer the simple question: should you make time for V-Rising? You awaken as a vampire who's been in slumber for way too long. The land around you has been taken over by the locals, who seem to have forgotten who truly rules. Your sleep has weakened you, so you will have to regain your strength and influence by hunting down and vanquishing the land's most powerful foes. In V-Rising, the idea of hunger and thirst are combined into one concept: a craving for blood. Initially stalking and draining local wildlife to replenish your power, you get imbued by the traits of the animals whose blood you consume. The purer the blood, the more powerful your traits. You then move from these creatures to humans, whose blood will vary in quality and traits. For example, a worker's blood would help you gather resources more efficiently, or a rogue and warrior's blood will grant combat traits from dealing more damage to mitigating the incoming damage based on their purity. This builds up to an even more special enemy whose blood, called V-Blood, is so pure that it contains special traits and can teach you new spells, new abilities, and new skills, such as summoning ghouls to fight for you, animal forms to aid your travels, or maybe how to make wool thread or a cabinet or two. The progression system in the game is locked behind the different V-Blood creatures, and while your actual power is based on the gear you equip, you will need to hunt down and ingest the blood of these enemies to be able to gain real power and upgrades. As you continue to feed and get stronger, you will also need to establish a foothold in the land, building up your territory from a meager encampment to small strongholds and outposts, and hopefully one day a multi-tiered castle fit for the ruler of the land. The base building aspect of the game is one of its most streamlined and unique that I've ever seen, such as placing similar crafting station in their own room with their specific flooring makes them not only produce faster, but more efficiently use your materials so you use less of it while crafting. Another highlight of this building system is that moving place down buildings and stations is super simple. You just pick it up and place it, and with the hundreds of different placeables, you can go nuts arranging and rearranging your castle. The learning curve of the game is quite straightforward, with clearly laid out goals for you to tackle, and there is no overly complicated systems implemented in the game other than the combat controls, which I will tackle later. However, some gameplay elements are not explained at all, leaving you to discover and experience them on your own. I don't want to spoil any future mechanics in the game, but if you do give it a try, make sure you keep up all your good equipment and weapons and fight the urge to salvage them. The world map is static and not procedurally generated, with enemies spawning in the same locations every day cycle, and resources replenished on a semi-random basis where you expect them. While this may sound like a downside in a game centered around discovery, the world appears to be meticulously designed and crafted to urge you to explore the nooks and crannies around it. There are clear paths put down by the locals, which are patrolled regularly with a range of enemies, ruins that are left behind from vampires ruling the world, and mysterious sites crying out for you to find out their secrets. And it's beautifully realized. From forest to open countryside and dark gloomy caves, the art direction of this game is amazing. It drives the vibe and atmosphere of the game perfectly. It's also huge, and while traversing it might be time consuming, you are quickly given movement increasing abilities, and there are well placed waygates to port between. You can also place your own at outposts strategically to cover any gaps and limit time travel. As in addition to the roaming enemies, some of which are deadly, you are limited by the time of day, and traveling during daylight is risky and exposure to sunlight will quickly kill you. Unfortunately, you are stuck in third-person top-down view of the world, not even able to look up at the monuments scattered around the land, or even your castle if it's perched on top of a cliff, which I found a little disappointing, of course wanting to bask in the glory of my buildings. Which brings me to my primary annoyance with the game, the controls. It might be just me, but the top-down action RPG controls combined with the twin-stick shooter style of attacks and full 360-degree control of the camera, everything just clashes with each other, as some abilities are based on the direction you're facing, some are the direction you're moving, and some are based on where your cursor is. And in a hectic boss fight, you tend to lose where your cursor is sometimes, and wildly trying to navigate, aim my abilities, and control the camera at the same time, I completely miss. There is a short global delay as well between being able to use an ability that I can't seem to intuitively chain skills together or queue them up. This initially had me quit the game, actually the first time I tried it earlier in the year, and not want to try it ever again due to my frustrations. However, over the summer with the newest update and finding some more friends to play with, I decided to give it another go. I'm not usually slow at picking up controls of games, but the different combat styles of the different weapons and abilities do take time to get used to, and currently I am clearing up to Act 2 of the game. With 50 solid hours in, I'm just really getting used to these controls and the cadence of combat. However, before finally getting it, the hardest part of any boss fight so far is me getting frustrated frustrated and losing my cursor or my direction. All through Act 1, I was playing with 3 to 4 friends on a private server, in the same clan, cooperating in all aspects, including base building, resource gathering, and boss killing. Ironically, some boss fights are harder if you bring friends, as their health mechanics and abilities will change based on a number of players. However, I've been told that the further you are into the game, the more you will require others to help you. And some rumors out there have it that future boss fights are akin to MMO-style raid bosses. So far, however, deep into Act 2, the boss fights have not been that difficult. Maybe 2 to 3 times dying before getting the hang of their mechanics, and a couple of dozen times just navigating the controls. I must confess, I have not tried the player versus player aspect of the game, but I've read about it and watched some videos covering it, and it seems to change your experience of the game tremendously. Maybe one day I'll try it, but I like a chilled back experience. Stressing out about my base being raided by a group of vampires while I'm offline or being ganked during a boss fight is just not my cup of tea. With its early access started May 2022 and the first major release just a year later, V-Rising development progress is quite promising, with a full release slated for 2024 in the spring. It's a title which I think has already realized its potential. The amount of content and variety to keep you occupied for hundreds and hundreds of hours is there if you want it. However, restarting a new character will be a repetitive experience. As mentioned earlier, the map is static with no surprises if you've already explored most of it. The learning curve of the game is quite easy. The game holds your hand for quite a long time with quests and goals to work towards, and slowly lets go. Losing some points in the gameplay aspect, the gameplay loop is quite satisfying, and while some weapons are slightly better than others, the variety of skills, spells, and abilities that give you a nice varied, ongoing gaming experience. Replayability is just not there, unless you augment the experience by doing PvP and joining friends to try to dominate another server against others. The sound design isn't that special. The music is just there. The enemies do have well-acted voice lines, but they do get quite repetitive as you continue to encounter them over and over again. The weapon and ability sound effects are good enough though. The control scheme and UI, as I mentioned, is personally very frustrating. The controls are wonky and took some time to get used to, and I still struggle with them. The UI, however, can also use more polish passes, as it seems unfair of me to rate it fully right now. Where the game scores the most points is in its graphics and art direction. There's great map design, and the graphics convey and realize the gothic atmosphere of the game beautifully. However, it does lack a little bit of a spooky factor for a vampire game. V-Rising is a very well realized and themed vampire survival game, with different enough and unique mechanics from other games in the genre to separate it from the herd. And while the game is still in early access, there's enough content to justify purchasing it now, if only to get a discount before the full release and price increase takes effect. Saying that, I would highly recommend first finding 2 to 3 other friends to join the fun before I recommend that you make time for V-Rising. Thank you very much for checking out the video. I hope this helped you get an idea of the game and if you should try it out. Check out more videos when you have time, subscribe for future videos, and always make time for games.